Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. I am Blair, also known as Bubbs, alongside DiMari Cooley. DiMari, thanks for coming on again. Another week of previewing games, week 11 of the NFL season. How's it going, man?
I'm good, besides getting to the almost the back end of the season is
Yeah.
going by a little too fast.
Yeah, definitely. It's flying by. It's always unfortunate to see the season fly by this fast, but this is where it does kind of get a lot of fun, where you get a lot of these meaningful games here in November into December that have a lot of playoff implications. The true playoff teams start to separate themselves amongst the teams that aren't going to make the postseason. And a lot still has to go down here over the next month and a half into January, and eventually the postseason shortly thereafter. So we'll break down a couple games today. We'll start with the Browns Steelers. Then we'll go to the Cowboys Panthers as the Cowboys will hit the road, face Carolina. We'll also take a look at the Jets Bills. Then we'll take a look at the Monday night showdown, a rematch of the Super Bowl last year between the Eagles and the Chiefs. And we'll also take two quick looks at the Vikings Broncos on Sunday night. And we'll also take a look at the Raiders Dolphins this afternoon as well. So we'll start here in the AFC North as the Browns host the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers coming off another win. Both teams coming off of thrilling victories. Browns with the comeback win against the Ravens. Steelers with another close victory against the Green Bay Packers. But before we get into that, the AFC North has been crazy this season, and it got even crazier this week with the injury of Joe Burrow and the injury of Deshaun Watson. What are your thoughts on those two injuries? Two brutal blows for both those teams. Dorian Thompson-Robinson will take over the quarterback one duties in Cleveland, and Jake Browning will take over the quarterback one duties in Cincinnati. I'll start with this. What is your overall thoughts on those two injuries, and who do you feel is going to be more impacted in a negative way with two of their quarterbacks going down for the year, the Bengals and the Browns?
I'm definitely going to say it's the Bengals that's going
Yeah.
to be affected the most, just because Browning hasn't had a lot of playing experience, so he's
No.
kind of just thrown in there, and you're in the middle of the division right now, and also like the conference because you're still fighting for a playoff spot. So he has to come in and get familiar with those guys because he's probably not taking a lot of first team reps in practice throughout the week. So it's definitely going to be Cincinnati that's going to be affected most by this because at least, DTR, he did play a little bit this year when Watson went down and they ran the ball very well. So they kind of know how they're going to scheme around him. So with Cincinnati, you're basically starting from scratch.
Yeah, definitely. And I also feel too, like, just in terms of the overall talent, Joe Burrow is miles ahead of Deshaun Watson, who had a really bad year after signing that massive contract and all that stuff. So I just feel like for a while now, the Browns were kind of winning in spite of Watson. A lot of these games they were winning not because of Watson, it was their run game and their defense that was winning those games. And as for Cincy, Joe Burrow, when he's on his game, he's one of the elite quarterbacks in football. And anytime you take an away elite player from an offense like that, that is so heavily reliant on their passing offense and all the weapons around him, you're going to definitely feel the impact. So I would tend to agree there. I think Cincinnati, it's a tough blow. Questions around Jake Browning. Who knows if they bring him? I mean, there's a couple guys that you could sign off the street, but it's a tough spot for both those teams. Before we get into the Browns-Bengals game tonight, or Browns-Steelers game, just back to the Bengals here for a second. Do you think their playoff hopes are out the window? Do you think they could still find a way to squeak in with, guys like Mixon? If they run the ball a little bit more, they've still got weapons. If Jake Browning can do just enough, their defense is solid. They've got some solid pieces in the secondary. Do you feel they can do just enough to maybe get in as a 9-10 win team? Or do you feel the season at this point is kind of lost with Burrow going down?
I think it's done, and it's because
Done.
the weapons aren't healthy. T. Higgins hasn't
Yeah.
played in a few games, so there's no telling when T. Higgins is coming back. And even if you try to lean on Joe Mixon, like Joe Mixon's a great back, but they're one of the worst rushing teams in all of football. So it's
Yeah.
not like you can really lean on him to run the ball well and then open up the pass down the field. So like you can't, and you can see with Cincinnati, they are kind of the opposite of how like teams like to run their offense, where we're going to beat you running and then we're going to open up, throwing the ball down the field when you bring your safeties up. But Cincinnati is like,
Yeah.
hey, we're just going to beat you throwing the ball down the field. We get in the red zone and we're going to hand the ball off here. But with them coming in being, like I said, one of the worst rushing teams in all of football, and
Uh-huh.
three of the defenses in their division alone are the best in total defense and
Yeah.
rushing defense, yeah, I think the season's shot for them.
Yeah, it's tough, and their schedule doesn't really get any easier because they've got Pittsburgh coming up after. Again, they played Thursday, so they have a couple of days off. But then they have Pittsburgh, and then Jacksonville. They still got the Vikings. They've still got Pittsburgh twice, home and the road. And then they got the Chiefs on the road. So their schedule doesn't get any easier here the second half. It's tough because this is the second major blow to Burrow early in his career, and it just stinks as an NFL fan anytime a guy of his caliber goes down like that. And, there's obviously some questions around the injury management during the week. Was he injured going into the game? Either way, it's a tough blow. And the AFC North just becomes more interesting and weird because the division has been crazy all year. So we shift to the game today. It'll be the Browns hosting the Steelers. Already talked a little about the Browns. The Steelers are finding ways to win. I don't know how they're winning some of these games. It's close. It's ugly, but their turnover differential is good. They're forcing turnovers. They're limiting the mistakes on offense. They're doing just enough offensively, it feels, to get the job done, but it's not pretty, and a lot of it's been their defense. What are your thoughts on Pittsburgh?
They're the most fraudulent 6-3
Yeah.
team I think I've ever seen in football. Like, I don't know. I hate to look at it from this way, but they still, I believe they still play the Browns again. I know they have Cincinnati again, like you just said, twice.
Yeah.
So in the middle of that division, two of the starting quarterbacks that obviously make a big difference for the team, not as much Watson as Burrow does with Cincinnati, but two of the starting quarterbacks for teams that you're like in the middle of it for playoffs get hurt, season-ending injuries, and now you kind of get to just cruise through those few games. At the end of the day, you can't really go into the game with that mindset like, backup quarterback, we should win because NFL is NFL any given Sunday. But the Steelers kind of have it easy for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really it's interesting because you make a point like they're 6-3. I don't know how they're 6-3, and I don't know how they're going to fare the rest of the way, but you make a great point about their schedule. I mean, after this, they get Cincinnati, who's obviously banged up. Then they have Arizona, Pittsburgh, or New England, rather, and then the Colts, and then the Bengals again, and then the Seahawks and Ravens to wrap things up. But their schedule is very favorable, and they have found a way to beat up on some of the not great teams the last 2 weeks. They, beat the Titans. They beat the Packers both at home. Their defense, where would you rank their defense right now in terms of like where they rank in the NFL? I know they'll be without Minkah Fitzpatrick today, which is definitely something to keep an eye on in this game. But their defense has been so good; it's a big reason why they're 6-3. Where would you rank their defense in terms of top 5, top 10 in the NFL?
I'm going to say 5 to 8 range. Just watching San Francisco, Dallas, Baltimore, Cleveland, watching those four defenses every week, I'll give them the edge just because they force a lot of turnovers. But also with Pittsburgh, they're iffy. Some weeks you really don't know what you're going to get from them, where those other defenses are usually more consistent. So definitely 5 to 6. I can't really put a 5 right now in front of them off the top of my head, but in somewhere in between there.
Yeah, it's going to be a good battle between two really good defenses. You've got Myles Garrett for Cleveland. You got TJ Watt for the Steelers. So I'm expecting a low scoring game, while even if Pittsburgh makes the playoffs and no matter where the rest of the season goes, I don't think they'll go very far, but I'm going to take Pittsburgh in this one. I just think the Browns' new quarterback, there's probably going to be some, I don't know if you want to call it rust, but there's going to be some issues there. I think there's going to be, a little bit of disconnect chemistry issues early on in this game. So I'm going to actually take Pittsburgh here on the road to pick up the win in an ugly, low scoring game between two offenses that one took a blow to their quarterback and the Steelers just simply aren't good offensively. But who do you got coming away in this one?
I'm going to take the Browns on this one. I feel like if they can run the ball effectively, they don't have to be as effective as they've been all year, but even just, 75% of as good as they've been running the ball up until this week, if they can go in there and just maintain that ball control, don't turn the ball over, they will find a way to win this game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Browns come into this one, the 2-point home favorites. The over-under is set at 34.5, and that's all you need to know about this game being expecting a low-scoring defensive battle, a typical kind of old-school, just physical AFC North matchup in Cleveland today. So look forward to that game this afternoon. Now we move on to your Dallas Cowboys as they're coming off an absolute domination of the New York Giants last week as they beat Tommy DeVito and the Giants 49-17. We'll first start with that. I mean, you guys crushed them, and you guys crushed the season series winning obviously on Sunday night to open up the season 40-0, and then winning this one 49-17. 89-17 in 2 games, you guys outscored the Giants. That was pure dominance. What was your thoughts on last week?
Oh, I just going back to last week. I hate hearing from people this week. Oh, it's just the Giants. Like
Giants, yeah.
Dak did not sit down in the offseason to make the schedule. We just play who is on the schedule. But I know there's some injuries, but it was kind of funny hearing a lot of these analysts earlier before the season started saying that the Giants were closing the gap between us and the Eagles. They probably are further behind than they thought. But it's like I said, it's been pure dominance with this team. But again, I do want to see it this later part of the season where you got Buffalo coming up, you got Miami, you got Philly again, Seattle, Detroit. Like, well, that's the next few games on our schedule. So if they can keep it up for those, tougher competing teams, then I feel more confident.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree with you with playing teams on your schedule. Whoever's in front of you got to take care of business, get the job done. And they did just that last week. And I mean, if we're being honest here, the Giants are a train wreck. Who knows what they're going to do in the offseason? I mean, I think they'll probably go on and draft a quarterback. I don't know if they'll move on from Dable. I guess we could speak on a little bit here. Like, how do you think the Giants can approach this offseason? Because I mean, look, they're a mess. They're a train wreck. They'll play the Commanders today. I mean, I don't even know what to expect from that game. Tommy DeVito, they're rolling him out there. They're basically trying to lose that because they just continue to roll Tommy DeVito out there. But like, what do you think the Giants are going to do in this offseason? You think they're going to keep Daniel Jones and draft a receiver like, Marvin Harrison, or bring in a free agent wide receiver, or trade for somebody and try and build around him for another year? Do you think they're going to draft a quarterback? How do you think the Giants are going to approach this? I think they'll probably end up drafting a quarterback and starting fresh with Dable, giving him a new quarterback to develop, almost like he was given in Buffalo with Josh Allen. But what do you think the Giants will do this offseason? Because, again, people thought they were closing the gap, and they took a massive step back from winning a playoff game a year ago.
I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a quarterback, but not to take over Daniel Jones' place to start, but just to kind of light some fire under him of, hey, you got to get it together. You got 5, 4, 6 games, and if you don't figure it out, then we're going to go in another direction. But looking at this Giants team every single week, no matter kind of who you put back behind that offensive line and who you're throwing the ball, well, who are you throwing the ball to? It's not going to be no success with anybody because, like, they don't have an offensive line. They don't have weapons. And even you said, I believe last week, is every receiver on that roster is a wide receiver 3 anywhere else they go throughout the league. So, I mean, they set their quarterback up basically for failure. The offense is literally Saquon or nobody.
Yeah, exactly. Their receiving core is nothing. I mean, it's Isaiah Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton. Those guys on any competent competitive football team are, wide receiver 3rd options. They are not even in the conversation to be a wide receiver number 1. And again, that was the conversation going into the year for the Giants was, they went out and got Darren Waller, but they didn't have a legitimate wide receiver 1. People could talk themselves into, Isaiah Hodgins had a couple good games to close out last year. He had the good playoff game, but you can't trust a guy like that kind of came in, just caught a spark to be your number 1 guy. So the Giants are a mess, and every game they play, it's an absolute blowout. I mean, they're not even close. That's how bad they've been. So moving back to the Cowboys-Panthers game today, just want to get quickly here on the Panthers angle of things before we get into the prediction and what the Cowboys need to do to come away with the victory. They've been a train wreck. I mean, they're 1-8 this year. Frank Wright took back the play calling this week. It seems like a desperation move, trying to find something. Their only highlight was beating CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans, but outside of that, it's been a mess. And are you starting to get concerned that Bryce Young might just not be that good? Are you just from an outside fan, are you at that point now where fans should be concerned that Bryce Young, even though it's only 9 games in, that he might not be what we all thought he was going to be? It's a number 1 pick.
I think it's just too early to tell because looking at them, they're very kind of similar to the Giants. No offensive line, and outside of a 30-year-old Adam Thielen, they don't have anybody to throw the ball to either. So again, you kind of set your quarterback up for failure where you bring in your quarterback and the offensive coordinator is just not building around you to be successful. Like, look at the Texans, for example. You go draft a quarterback, but then you bring in Dalton Schultz and you bring in Noah Brown. you go to your quarterback and it's like, hey, who do you want? And you go get the guy that he asked for. You bring in free agent running back. You bring in Singletary. So they built around C.J. Stroud for him to be successful. With Carolina, they kind of just threw him in the fire. It was just like, hey, show us what you got. You were the number one pick, so prove it. And that team is not really a prove it type of team. You got to help your quarterback out.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think the coaching has been suspect as well, and the whole how they went about this whole coaching situation, because I go back to in the offseason with the Panthers where they fired Steve Wilkes, and I did not like the move. I thought it was a move that didn't make much sense. It reminded me a lot of a couple years ago when the Raiders fired Rick Bisaccia after he was the interim head coach and he took him to the playoffs and then they fired him. That reminded me of the same thing. Like the Panthers were playing meaningful games in December last year and they fired Wilkes and brought in Frank Wright. And it just didn't make a ton of sense to me. It was like the locker room was believing, he got the guys to buy, and then they fired him, brought in Frank Wright for a guy who just got fired. I know he's a good offensive mind. I know it's good for a young quarterback that just hasn't worked out. And I wouldn't be surprised if Frank Wright's out of here after this season. And again, taking back to play calling, it seems like a desperation move there in Carolina. Do you see a potential coaching change coming in the offseason, or do you think they're going to try and, it's the front office's fault for not putting enough around Stroud? If they can do more, they see what Frank Wright and Bryce Young could do. Do you feel there could be changes coming in Carolina?
I think they're going to give him a chance. They are going to let him end the season again. Your quarterback's a rookie. You've been a lot of injuries throughout the team. So they're probably going to give him another year. And again, they might get to that 4 or 5 range of games next year. And if they're sitting at 0-4, 0-5, 1-4, anything around there, then they're going to move into another direction.
Yeah, short leash early on could definitely be a path that they take. So to close things out here in this game, I'll start. I'm going to take the Cowboys here. They're 10.5-point favorites. They had no issue last week covering the spread. I'll take the Cowboys in a blowout here. I'm going to think they're rolling. They just dominated the Giants. Similar competition in terms of a team that's really struggling. And again, an opportunity here for the Cowboys to stack up some wins before the back end of their schedule gets a little bit more tougher. Who do you got coming away with the victory here?
I'm taking the Cowboys. I might not say a blowout, though. I just woke up with that feeling where it's just like, what are we going to get from them today? But definitely going to take the Cowboys on the road.
It'll be a Houston Texans Cowboys game here where it's going to be one of those Bryce Young's going to throw for 300 yards and it's going to be like 31-28 nail biter.
Would not be surprised.
Yeah, it's sometimes the teams like to do it to them or to the fans. So anyway, so that'll be close things out here with the Cowboys and the Panthers. Now moving on to the Jets and the Bills. NFL fans, you got your wish. The Jets are not on primetime this week. So you don't have to watch Zach Wilson and this offense, this putrid offense, I should say, go out there. But look, as much as I've sat here and destroyed this offense and we've talked about it a lot and it's been a mess and they're 4-5 and they've lost 2 straight, 2 embarrassing games on primetime. They've had 18 points in their last 2 games. It's November 19th and they still haven't scored a touchdown during this month. As much as it's been a mess and there's so many issues, the division and the AFC is still wide open for the New York Jets to take advantage of and still potentially be a playoff team. And that's the crazy thing. They're 4-5. Their offense has been one of the worst I've ever seen in my entire life. And here we are, and they have an opportunity against the Bills, who are 5-5, just fired their offensive coordinator. They have an opportunity to go on the road, sweep Buffalo. And if Miami loses to the Raiders today, that game on Black Friday coming up this week will be for the division lead. So it's crazy to think about that, but the Jets have a big opportunity here. What are your thoughts on like the AFC as a whole? Because it's just so crazy that even the Jets and the Bills, with everything that has gone on for those 2 teams this year, they still have a chance if they come away today with a victory.
I think in the AFC, nobody is, and it still sounds crazy to say that the Chiefs and the Ravens, how they've kind of looked. I still don't think anyone is really the solid outright number one just yet. Maybe another week or 2 between the Chiefs and the Ravens will kind of determine that. Mm-hmm. But, after 5 through 7, it's kind of open for anybody for the taking, because obviously the Jets are in the spot. I'm going to go back to the Jets. They're not in the spot to win the division right now. But like you just said, if they do win today by some way, somehow, and Miami some way loses to the Raiders, they're still right there. And looking at the AFC North now, where you have the teams like the Bengals and the Browns that are kind of in that mix, both expecting some slippage to come here with their
Yeah.
quarterbacks being hurt. So it's kind of open for anybody to take those last few spots.
Yeah, it's crazy, and this is just it's just one of those things for the Jets where you have to at some point take advantage. Like the NFL, the AFC is handing you an opportunity to end this 12-year playoff drought, and it's about time the New York Jets go out there and take it. So they're 7.5-point underdogs here. We'll start with the Jets perspective, then we'll go to all of the things that happened in Buffalo this week because there was a lot that went on. What do you feel the Jets need to do for this offense to finally click? I think a lot of it is rolling Zach out of the pocket, trying to use his athleticism, trying to use his legs. I would like to see Breece Hall a little bit more this week with some different route concepts, like a wheel route, which we saw last year against Miami. I would like to see them actually get him out there running routes more as a receiving back than just a check down option for this team. What do you feel this Jets offense needs to do? Is there any end in sight to this scoring drought, touchdown drought, 8 touchdowns in 9 games? Like, do the Jets have any solution? Do you have any solution that the Jets might be able to use here to find a way to inject some energy into a lifeless offense?
I'm first going to start with some of the off the field things, which is just the chemistry and what's going on in the locker room. Because I don't know if you saw, but I believe CJ Uzomah liked a Instagram post or a tweet or something, basically asking for his release. So that kind of shows where he's already at. Dalvin Cook stated earlier how he's unhappy with his role, and then you go release Michael Carter. So there's something going on with like the locker room. Everyone's not together. Something with the chemistry, because that offense right now, you kind of watch it and it's just so one dimensional. It's either we're going to hand the ball off or we're going to throw it to Garrett Wilson because he's down there somewhere. Which it doesn't help that like the others aren't getting open, they aren't getting involved, but that's kind of where that scoring drought is coming because teams know coming into the game where, hey, if the Jets can't run the ball, he's going to force the ball to Garrett Wilson or he's going to take sacks because the offensive line isn't blocking that well. Or if Breece Hall does get going, eventually Garrett Wilson is going to kind of get, upset and he's going to want the ball. And then Zach might start forcing things to Garrett Wilson, which isn't all on Zach. It could be a lot of the play calling. But it's definitely going to start with trying to get some of the other guys involved, trying to just keep guys their head above the water. Just let them know, season's been tough. We lost our quarterback. We're losing some ugly games, and we're not where we want to be. But you just buy in and you just trust the process, and anything can change within a few weeks. Use Minnesota, for example, with Josh Dobbs, kind of one of those things where just like it's really one game at a time. We just slowly start getting some more involvement through you guys here and there, and eventually we can open up the whole offense up instead of just hand off to Breece Hall, dump off to Breece Hall, or forcing something to Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, they've got to find ways to get other guys involved, and I totally agree. And Salah mentioned this week a little bit, and part of the releasing of Michael Carter was to get Izzy Abanaconda involved, who is obviously the rookie out of Pitt, which I think he has, has extreme speed, got some good burst, not great in blitz pickup, but somebody that might be able to inject some sort of energy into this offense with his speed ability in the open field and his shiftiness. But yeah, I mean, some of the new personnel, I think you got to see Uzama's, has just been committing penalties. He's like mugging people on the field at this point. So more Conklin, more Ruckert. I would like to see the undrafted free agent Jason Brownlee get an opportunity. Lazard's getting paid $44 million. He's got to start to play like a $44 million receiver, and they've got to find ways to spread the ball around a little bit more. And something to watch for. Garrett Wilson is dealing with the elbow injury. He's questionable, but he is expected to play. But that is something to watch for. He's not going to be 100%, so you might not be able to rely on him every single play to just force it to Garrett Wilson because he's not 100%. So you're going to have to be forced a little bit to get some of these other guys involved. And look, the defense is going to do their thing. They match up well against the Bills. They've caused Josh Allen a lot of issues, especially in week 1, forcing him into 3 interceptions on Monday night and a fumble. The turnovers problem continue to haunt the Bills. We go to the Bills side of things now. The firing of Ken Dorsey, they activated Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. What were your thoughts on the Ken Dorsey firing? And do you feel it's going to cause a change in Buffalo, or do you feel it's more Josh Allen just has a turnover problem and it's on him to fix that, not the coaching staff?
I feel like there's a little bit of both. The offense hasn't been as explosive as we've seen, the last 2 years where Buffalo was having their most success, but a lot of it does come down to Josh Allen. You watch
Yeah.
these games, and these are a lot of just bonehead plays, fumbling the ball, and I think last week was just really the point for the front office to like, we got to make a change, because
Yeah.
to go lose to that Denver team who has looked garbage for a lot of games this season. They've been looking
Mhm.
better kind of
Yeah.
later on here, but they're just losing these games where they should not even be close. The Jets, the first game, that blowout game there. Broncos should have been a blowout game. So outside of the Bills, really, for like Miami when they played them earlier this year, that's the only game where Buffalo has looked how they've looked the previous years. So it's a little bit of it's a both, like it's a mix of both.
Yeah, I agree too. I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, some of his decisions are just they're questionable. Again, like you see some of these interceptions, the one he threw last week or whatever he had, two, I think it was. Um, it's just they're questionable decisions, throwing into double coverage. But I also think too, from a coordinator perspective, I don't think the Bills have done a good enough job of getting him out of the pocket. And then that's something the Jets have to watch for him today. I think Joe Brady's going to try and get him out of the pocket because Allen is better sometimes when he's on his legs, when he's able to extend plays. Another guy too that sometimes when he's not thinking, that's where his raw talent and ability just takes over. So it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be a very low scoring game. I would like to see a guy like Jordan Whitehead have another big game. He's had 4 of his 11 interceptions in his career have come against Josh Allen. Allen this season, 8 of the 10 games, in only 2 of the 10 games this year, he's had not a turnover or fumble, but 8 of the 10, he's had either a interception or a fumble. So he's been a turnover machine. Jets need to force those today. Who do you got winning this game, and what's the score, and how do you feel this thing shakes out?
I'm going to lean Buffalo, just knowing the importance to stay ahead of, slipping down to where you're completely out of the playoffs. No, right now, I believe they're sitting at 8 if the playoffs was to end today. So I think Buffalo kind of knows the importance going in. They're going to win a close one.
Yeah, I unfortunately I think I agree there. I think it's going to be Buffalo. I hope I'm wrong again. I mean, I think if the Jets defense could force turnovers and they could take risks, and that's something I want to see. Like the Jets have used their offense in the wrong way because they realize that their defense is so good that they're playing so conservative on offense because they feel if we can do just enough, we're going to find ways to win. But I look at the opposite. I think this offense has got to take chances, take calculated risk, because if you do make a mistake, if you do turn the ball over, you can at least trust your defense to get a stop and not have that turnover turn into something larger. So I'd like to see some chances. They haven't scored, and for that reason, I just don't think they'll win, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, if they could find a way to muster some drives together, maybe they'll get the job
And
done.
I kind of want to see out of them, like you just perfectly said it, whereas like they kind of go into the game, if we just score 20 points, that is enough. That is kind of
Yeah.
all we have to do to win the game. So I know different personnel, different coaching, different talent, but kind of I want to see them similar to like what Dallas does with the defense that they have, where it's the defense is going to get hype and momentum going off the offense. So if the
Yep.
offense is going out there and they're marching up and down the field, and they're scoring points, scoring points. That defense is like, hey, let's go get us a goose egg. Let's run up the scoreboard a little bit, force some turnovers, get the offense back on the field to keep the offense rolling. We're just seeing the complete opposite, and perfectly said once again, where let's just score. We're going to be conservative. If we can get 17, 20 points and we can get to the fourth quarter and, we're not trailing, we can lean on the defense to win that game for us. But we are getting to that point and that part of the season where teams are going to pick it up a little bit because a lot of playoff, indications go off of their performances, and they got to win some big games where teams are going to start to, pick it up and try to light that scoreboard up and get some momentum for these next few weeks to carry that into the playoffs. So the Jets kind of definitely need a different approach going into today.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you even just look at next week, like the high flying offense that Miami has. The Jets defense is great, but Miami's going to put up points. You're not going to be able to win every game with 13. You're going to have to eventually, like you said, put up 20, put up 23 points. You're going to have to score touchdowns at some point. It's just not sustainable. And unfortunately, the first 6 weeks of the season, or first 7 weeks, I should say, they were finding ways to win. without scoring much touchdowns at all. But the last 2 weeks, the unfortunate reality has kicked in that you're going to need touchdowns to win games against teams like the Chargers, who, even though their defense is bad, their offense is really solid, and the Raiders, who I don't know how the heck we lost that game. But either way, we move on here to the Eagles and the Chiefs, a Super Bowl 57 rematch. This should be a lot of fun. I think this is probably the game of the week. Might be one of the better games we've seen so far this season in Kansas City. Philly coming off their bye week, heading into Arrowhead. This should be a lot of fun. What are your first thoughts as we head into a Super Bowl 57 rematch between Kansas City and Philly?
It just makes my stomach hurt to know Philly is sitting at 8-1 and they're doing as good as they're doing. But I mean, it's gonna be fun to watch, and I think this might be a Super Bowl preview once again.
Yeah.
Hate to admit it, even though I think Philly is very fraudulent, but we talk about that another time. But it's gonna be kind of interesting to see that even though the Eagles defense hasn't been that well this year, how the Chiefs receivers are going to match up and take advantage of the mismatches in the secondary for Philly. Because off the top of my head, thinking about this game, I'm like, outside of Travis Kelce, who is Mahomes throwing the ball to, coming into this game? But then you think about it, I believe they're 7-2 and sitting in first place or tied for first place. So it's just kind of hard to say which way this game is going to lean just as we're talking about previewing it.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially now, like you mentioned, with this being another Super Bowl rematch. It's certainly possible, and especially now in the AFC with Joe Burrow going down, that seems to be. And I guess if you want to say he's been the one guy that's been able to crack Patrick Mahomes, he has been, because he took him down in the AFC Championship game and he gave him a run for his money last year. But outside of him, nobody's been able to stop Mahomes in the AFC. So it seems like it's Mahomes and Lamar and everybody else, but with Mark Andrews going down too for Baltimore, it certainly doesn't help. So this is possibly a Super Bowl 57 rematch, although I wouldn't want that because I don't like Philly. And to be honest, with all the off the field nonsense with the Chiefs and Taylor Swift, it's been annoying, and I don't want to hear about them for an extra 2 weeks going into the Super Bowl. So I'd much rather see two different teams in the Super Bowl this year. But we'll look at the Philly side of things here. Dallas Goedert, obviously dealing with the injury, he won't play. How do you feel that's going to affect them? Do you think they'll be affected at all without Dallas Goedert out there Monday night?
I do, but I don't. He hasn't, and I could be wrong, but I just like he hasn't had that much of an impact as he's had usually like the last 2 years, just because of AJ Brown's eruption. So, but having him on the field, though, you do have to respect him being on the field, and you don't want to leave him one-on-one. But now with him being out, you can kind of lean more towards help on the outside with the receivers. But the thing with Philly, and I like that, I hate to say it, is just they run the ball so well too. Yeah. So it's really not one way to stop him. But he is a great run blocker as well. So I wonder how much that is going to kind of change with him not being in there.
Yeah, Philly they can run it. They're really, obviously, like you said, really good with it, with running the rock. Swift's put together a really good season. Hurts obviously can do some really good things with his legs. AJ Brown's had a phenomenal season. Where would you rank AJ Brown right now in the NFL? I know him and CeeDee Lamb right up there, but where would you rank? How would you rank him? Because I think AJ Brown, I think, has probably gotten more hype than CeeDee Lamb, but part of that's the Cowboys just seem to be hated by the national media. But like, how would you rank Brown this season, who's got over 1,000 yards, and as we sit here are only in week 11?
It's hard not to be biased when I say this, but after last week, I'm going to move him down to 3. I had him at 2 right after Tyreek Hill, but I'm going to give CeeDee Lamb that edge at 2. But just AJ Brown's been crazy this year. There's no way to guard him. Like, I mean, you can put a safety on top of him. You can try to jam him. You can give him some separation. Some separation. And either way, is either he's going to run by you, he's going to out-muscle you, he's going to out-physical you. It's just he's been insane this year.
Yeah, you mentioned just the physicality aspect. That's we talk about a lot of times, like the NFL, you look at, some of the speed guys like Tyreek Hill and guys that are really good in space, but he's one of those just good one-on-one physicality, almost like if you want to say like a DK Metcalf in a way, just a big body receiver where you could put 4 guys on him. It's not going to matter. he's going to find a way to go up and make a play. So that's certainly something that the Chiefs, like every team that play the Eagles, are going to have to look out for. But as I always say, if the Jets can find a way to beat Philly without Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, I think the Chiefs could probably find a way to beat Philly. You look at the Chiefs side of things, it's interesting because like the Chiefs are 7-2 and they're playing well, but I still feel like like when you look at their team and you look at their roster, as we talk about the receiving core, they're finding ways to get it done, and it's just Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce again. Like, how would you like grade the Chiefs overall? Because I know they're 7-2, but they've had some really close, like some of these like close games that maybe they haven't looked as dominant. Do you feel the Chiefs are like legitimately a really good 7-2 team?
I do, and a lot of it is to do with how well the defenses look. This probably
Yeah.
has been the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has had since he became the starter with Kansas City. And you just mentioned where a lot of these games they don't look as dominant and they don't look how we usually expect to see them. But those are the
Mhm.
games you're going to get in the playoffs. So
Yep.
them finding ways to be able to win those games with, I don't want to say lack of production from the receivers, but kind of lack of production from the receivers, that kind of just puts Patrick Mahomes like even more up here on like a different level from
Yeah.
anybody else in the league. Because I don't think maybe Joe Burrow, but I don't think any other
Mhm.
quarterback in the league right now would take that Chiefs team, at least the offense, and be 7-2.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about earlier, without Burrow, there's not much competition there in the AFC for Mahomes, but I agree. Like there's not many guys that can do what Mahomes is doing. It's crazy. And some of these throws that he continues to make, it's like backyard football throws where he just chucks it downfield and Kelce runs underneath and they pick up a big gain. So this should be a lot of fun. Chiefs 2.5 point favorites. They're at home in Arrowhead, which is a big deal. I'll take the Chiefs in this one. I think if this was in Philly, I'd take the Eagles, but at home, tough place to play, Arrowhead. I'm going to take Kansas City. They took down Philly last year. I think the Chiefs too realized that. I don't know if you want to like say they like smell blood in the water, but I think they could tell that the AFC is theirs. It's right there for them to take it with Joe Burrow and again the Ravens are still there too. But I think if the Bengals continued on that hot stretch, they probably could have gave a Chiefs a run for their money there with the way Burrow was playing. But who do you got coming away with this win? With this win?
I'm going to say the same. I'm gonna give the Chiefs the advantage just because they're playing at home. And if
Yeah.
Taylor Swift wants to bring any luck to the Chiefs, do it today and then leave our football
Yeah.
alone for the rest of the season. But
Yeah.
I hate to say it, they do play a lot different. At least Travis Kelce with her in attendance, and I believe she will be there. Give me the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'll take the Chiefs as well. Yeah, I agree. Just for Cowboys fans, for you guys, just this week, let Kelsey go off and then back down to normal football
Yes.
lives. But anyway, so we move on here to two quick games that we'll take a look at to close things out. Raiders Dolphins. Again, we talked about it a little bit earlier. If the Jets win, this game would have. Well, I mean, it's 1 o'clock. Jets are at 4 o'clock. But if the Dolphins lose this game and the Jets head into the 4 o'clock game today against the Bills with an opportunity to get a win, would set up next week on Black Friday to be first place in the AFC's matchup. Who do you have coming away with this one? It's interesting because again, the Dolphins are major 2 touchdown favorites. Are you buying into the Raider hype under Antonio Pierce that they can maybe make a little bit of a run here? Or do you feel they beat up the Jets and the Giants, which haven't been very hard to do this year?
New York has not been very
Yeah,
football friendly this year, so
no.
it's definitely that. It's no way, and I guess I give my prediction away here. It's just no way I see the Raiders hanging into this game, especially come second half. Like they might keep it
Yeah.
close kind of in the first half, but once Miami adjusts, I just don't see the Raiders being able to stick around. Miami is too, explosive
Yep.
offensively. Their defense isn't too bad. And with Jalen Ramsey coming back, I feel like that is going to spark that defense a little more. So with him being back and just the Raiders just don't have all the pieces to like be able to stick with this Dolphins team.
Yeah, I agree. They simply just don't have enough explosiveness. I think they'll probably keep it close early on. Like you said, they'll come out with a lot of energy, an opportunity to kind of, I guess, shock the world in a way with, beating a team as 14-point underdogs on the road. And I think they'll also come out, playing hard for Antonio Pierce. But look, it's Aiden O'Connell. versus Tua, Tyreek Hill, and all those guys. Like O'Connell, he has not done much. He's done just enough, but he's not going to be able to. This game will probably, Dolphins will probably put up, 28-31 in this game potentially. I don't think Aiden O'Connell and this Raiders offense has enough, unless if they can find a way to just ground and pound with Josh Jacobs, and he just is just dominating and dominating. But you also got to look at, too, from a Dolphins perspective, they get Davon Achane back in this game, which is big for them. So I'll take the Dolphins here. As much as I'm rooting hard for the Raiders, I think the Dolphins are winning this game. I just don't think the Raiders are good enough. That's probably the simplest way to put it. We move on here to the final game of today, which is Sunday Night Football, Vikings, Broncos. I'm looking forward to this one. Josh Dobbs on primetime. This is going to be a lot of fun. What have been your thoughts on Josh Dobbs coming over to the Vikings, winning 2 straight games? It's been an awesome story. He's lighting it up. He's playing well. Like I'm all aboard the Josh Dobbs trains in the Minnesota Vikings as a team to look out for in the NFC.
Well, looking back to when we played the Cardinals, it's no longer just we played Josh Dobbs at the Cardinals. Yeah. So it starts to look better every week. And I've always liked Josh Dobbs. Even at Tennessee, I like Josh Dobbs. I remember him for that Hail Mary against Georgia. So he's just, I don't know, to come in like with that new system and you probably don't know 40% of the playbook. Well, you probably only know 40% of the playbook, and you're just going out there and being creative, using your legs, and using your weapons. And remember, this is all without Justin Jefferson. When Justin Jefferson gets back and he gets more, like Josh Dobbs gets more familiar with that playbook, I would not be surprised if it comes down later in the season, maybe on the Lions and the Vikings beat, if they're playing for first place in the NFC North. I would not be surprised.
No, not at all. It's been an incredible story going on the road and going into a game where the rookie quarterback gets hurt for the Vikings. Josh Dobbs comes in. He was working with Cadence on the sideline with the offensive line. He didn't practice all week. He goes out there, gets the win, gets another week to, learn the system a little bit more, goes out there against the Saints, get the job done. He didn't even fully know the system. He was still learning a lot of the guys' names. And it's crazy that he's continued this winning trend for the Vikings. They've won 5 straight. And you mentioned the NFC North still being open here. The Dolphins have been really good, but if the Vikings continue this, it's still open because if the Vikings win tonight, they get the Bears, Raiders, and Bengals the next 3 games. Those are all 3 very winnable games, especially if Josh Dobbs continues to do what he does. And then you would line up 2 of their final 3 games are against the Lions. So a lot of it's still right in front of the Vikings to take. And it's been an incredible story for Josh Dobbs. As a Jet fan, I'm a little jealous because we could have had him. I mean, it took a day 3 pick to get him. You wonder where the Jets are right now with Josh Dobbs. But either way, we got Zach, and we got to find a way to muster up some points either way. But you go to the Broncos side of things. The Broncos look dead. They were 1-5. They just lost to the Jets and the Chiefs back-to-back. And now they've won 3 straight. They beat Kansas City at home. They obviously had the thrilling victory on Monday night against Buffalo. Do you believe in this Broncos team, or is this just a couple wins over the last 3 weeks and it's not a lot?
It's just really hard to say because, again, you kind of never know exactly what you're going to get out of the Broncos.
Yeah.
They, as bad as they looked against Buffalo, that just says everything we need to know about Buffalo by themselves. But, they found a way to win. So it's just how moving forward are they going to be able to win these low-scoring games? Is their defense going to play well enough to keep them in these low-scoring games? Because what we've seen from Buffalo, if they play somebody who scores more than 28 points, I don't think they have a chance to win that game. So they need these games to be very low scoring. The defense forces some turnovers, give them the ball, and some good field advantage for them to be able to go down, put some points on the board. So I don't know if I'm really feeling Denver right now, if it's just all a fluke.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how to feel because you look at their first 2 games of the regular season, just looking at them right now as to where they could be. They lost by a combined 3 points. So they could have easily started out 2-0, and then that would put them in a position right now to be, 6-3 as opposed to 4-5. Again, I don't know if it's just, hey, they beat Denver, or they beat Green Bay rather, who's not very good. They beat a Chiefs team with Mahomes under the weather, and they beat a Bills team that is all over the place when it comes to offensively. So these next couple weeks will be really important for them. I don't know. You never know what you're going to get out of Russ. I mean, let Russ cook. Are we going to get a massive game out of him? Or are you going to get – the defense has been better, and last week was primarily the defense and also just, again, the turnovers for the Bills, which was, defensively, but some of it was just the bad mistakes as we talked about. So I don't know how to feel. I'm going to take the Vikings, though, in this game. I think even though Broncos are at home and that stadium should be mile high, stadium should be roaring, knowing that their season is still alive in an AFC that is wide open, I'm still going to take Josh Dobbs and the Vikings. I think this could be one of these premier wins for Josh Dobbs, going on the road, prime time, just 3 weeks with the team. Big opportunity for Minnesota. I'll take them. Who do you got coming away with the victory?
I'm going to take the Vikings as well, and I believe the Josh Dobbs train continue rolling.
Yep. All aboard Josh Dobbs train. So Denver 2.5-point favorites. Over under set for this game at 41.5. So we'll take the Vikings with this one. Get to 7-4, and man, their season is alive and well when it seemed dead there for a little while. So to close things out, any closing thoughts on the Week 11 slate here, as we're just about 2 hours out from the start of the first round of games today?
Just another good week of football, and like I said, a lot of playoff indications for these next few games. So, like you said, as teams start to ramp it up a little bit and kind of pick it up, I think we're gonna have some good games. Maybe a few upsets today too.
Yep. Yeah, I'm hoping we get an upset up in Buffalo today. That's the hope. We get a couple touchdowns and a nice win. So that'll do it for NFL Week 11 preview. Enjoy the games today. A lot of big ones. And we'll see you back here next week talking all things NFL and getting you set for Week 12. And enjoy the games today. Enjoy Thanksgiving, all the football that is on there as well. A packed slate of games coming up. Enjoy it. As always, thanks for watching.